Okay, hi, good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here. It's the first time I'm here at Meridien JC. Before I came, I was having lunch with some friends, and these friends were telling me that you all have a great fencing team. A very random fact, but I was told that I should mention this because you guys are apparently really very good. Okay, today we are doing fencing of a different type here. Okay, I want to start out by saying that, okay, this seems like a very daunting subject, the economy, but it's actually a very interesting subject, and we'll try to make it as interesting as possible, not too dry. It's also very important because it affects all of our livelihoods, our jobs, our families, the future of Singapore. I was trained in economics. I have been covering economics for the last maybe 12 years in the Straits Times. I just wanted to start by saying that it's a very interesting time to be looking at and talking about the Singapore economy for two reasons. I'm told that about roughly half of you take economics, so you might find some of this interesting things to think about as we go through the talk. The first interesting thing about the Singapore economy now is that for a long time, we were always told that Singapore is an open economy, right? We are very small, we rely on the world, for trade, we manufacture goods for the world because our market is too small, and at the same time, we are affected by things that go on in the world, like inflation, the prices of goods, because we don't make any goods ourselves. We don't make the stuff we eat. We import everything. So something happens in the world, it affects us. So if we have economic problems, it is because of the world, the global economy, right? Unfortunately now, it's very interesting in Singapore that if you look at things like whether there is a shortage of labor or whether there is inflation now, inflation is rather high now, these problems were not created so much by the world out there, but by ourselves. So this is the first time in a long time that our economic problems were largely created at home, as opposed to somewhere generated around the world, even though we are an open economy. I don't know whether Aaron will go into that, but that's one thing that's interesting about now. The second thing that's interesting about today is that when you are a student of economics, you will find out, and some of you may carry on and do it at a higher level, some of you will become you take it at university, you can't help but feel that economics and politics are intertwined, okay? And for a long time when I was studying economics, we were told that, economics is economics, politics is politics, right? But not anymore in Singapore. I think that the Singapore economy today is, well, not to a large extent driven by political realities that have changed in the last 5 years. For example, Singaporeans have developed this reaction to there being too much foreign labor in Singapore. And because of that, the government has tightened foreign labor. And because of that, companies cannot find the labor they want. And because of that, the economy is slowing down. The latest figures are that the economy actually shrank very slightly, 0.6%, but it shrank in the first quarter of this year. Okay, so with those 2 points, that Singapore, the economy today is no longer so, the problems are not created by the world, but by ourselves. And the fact that economics and politics are now more intertwined in Singapore than ever before, that's the backdrop that we are to which we are talking about the Singapore economy today. I'd like to introduce Aaron now, who will give us a presentation on the Singapore economy before we go into the Q&A. Thanks.
Thanks, Iki. Okay, so I tried to do something different today. I don't know if you heard of Prezi. This way we have a lot of problems with the presentation, but if something happens, and just ignore it and I'll just keep talking. So just listen to me instead of looking at the presentation. No, okay, so Iggy basically covered most of, I think, the key points of the Singapore economy and what the issues and challenges they're facing. And as he pointed out, it's going to be a really, really interesting and challenging period, not just for ourselves, working professionals, but certainly for you when you grow up, when you go into the working world, and you'll be faced with very tough and difficult choices. both as a worker here, working here and as a citizen in your own country. So I just thought I'd start from the very beginning. Very simple look at what Singapore economy is. Singapore is really interesting. If you look at, so I just put out some countries over there. Look at the screen. Of these countries, just mentally arrange them in order of the size of GDP. Let's give you about 10 seconds. Obvious ones are there, but the not so obvious ones and where Singapore is a bit more interesting. Okay, so on top, the first one, as you can imagine, is quick. Yeah. Okay. United States, China, obviously top two, Germany, Malaysia, and then Singapore, and then actually Israel, and then Portugal comes below Singapore, and then Ireland. So some of these countries that we hear of, European countries that we hear of in the news, who have a lot more natural resources than we do, a lot more people than we do. Our size of our economy is actually bigger than them. In fact, I think according to the IMF, we're the 36th largest economy in the world today. And that's extraordinary given that we are a tiny country. Actually, what's really more interesting is that according to some surveys, we are actually the richest country in the world. If you measure GDP per capita, it means you divide the economy by the number of people residing here, we are the richest country in the world. So just some factoids. Some other factoids. Trade, as Iggy pointed out, is 3 times the GDP. Singapore is the 19th smallest country. We usually hear of large companies operating out of Singapore, your Hewlett-Packard, your Shell, or your MNCs. But actually, small firms, the people you see operating shops in the shopping malls, doing hawker centers, they actually employ 70% of the workforce here. So SMEs are crucial, extremely important in Singapore's economy. And 90% of those small firms actually employ less than 10 people. 1.8% actually is now 1.9%, but it's still near record lows. I think our lowest was ever 1.7, or that was in the mid-2000s. And we have one of the lowest unemployment rates in the world. And of course, we're one of the richest countries in the world. So all these stats stack up. And it's really no wonder that people have called us an economic miracle. And this is why. Yes, we are an economic miracle because we basically zero resources, except for maybe what you call a deep sea harbor. Working population, one of the smallest in the world. And yet, 36th largest economy in the world. And not just the economy and the size of it, we have world champions, your Sembawang Corp, your Keppel, your Singapore Airlines. They are world beaters, they compete with the best in the world. In fact, Sembawang Corp and Keppel Corp dominate the rig building industry, the rigs that you use to drill oil out of the sea. They occupy 70% between two of them. And we are consistently ranked as one of the most competitive economies in the world. And this is important. We are a creditor nation, meaning that we don't borrow. If you read the general news today, you pick up a newspaper, one of the biggest problems facing governments today is that a lot of governments are in debt, and hugely in debt. And it creates lots of problems. When governments are in debt, they can't spend and they can't generate jobs. And it's a real problem. Youth unemployment, fortunately for Singaporeans here, is low. But for the rest of the world, youth unemployment is something like hovering at 50%. It means when you graduate from university, let's say you're in Spain, half of you will not get a job. And we are constantly punching above our weight. Our own Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister, Tharman Shanmugaratnam, he heads the IMF Policy Steering Group. Basically, he's the brains behind one of the largest lenders in the world economy today. So, am I trying to sell you propaganda? I love Obama, and yeah, I thought this was quite funny. But no, really, I mean, facts speak for themselves. The economy is really very strong. It's an amazing economy. It's a very complex animal, but there are problems.